you as I watched what took place Saturday, and I'm sure millions of others want to thank you too. I want to ask you a few quick questions, if you can answer quickly. How many children do you have?
I have 3 children.
Do you celebrate Christmas?
Of course.
So you'd probably like to be home with your kids on Christmas, with the holidays coming up, I suppose, on a Saturday, now wouldn't you, Senator?
Certainly. Who wouldn't?
And yet, you thought it was important enough, the issue of the Constitution, the issue of the powers versus Article 1 versus Article 2, the power of the purse, the power over immigration, what this president has done without any statutory power whatsoever on amnesty, and he continues to do it. You thought it was important with this massive spending bill to join Ted Cruz, to challenge Harry Reid, and question whether this was constitutional, and for that, you're being brutally attacked, not just by Democrats, but by Republicans. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wanted to vote. I wanted to vote on whether or not the president's got authority to do this. I think he has no authority. I know he has no authority. Not under the Constitution, not under statute. And that's what I wanted, was to get a vote on that question. And some of my colleagues aren't too pleased. But, you know, the good news is the American people are with us. The other good news is we do have an opportunity coming up in February to get the whole Congress on board with this issue, to get the whole Congress to sound off to the president and to signal that ours is not a government of one. We're not going to tolerate a president who acts like he's a king.
Also, I want people to know you're a very intelligent, successful attorney. You were a law clerk to a Supreme Court justice, weren't you?
Yes, I was a law clerk to Justice Alito.
Mm-hmm. And your father, who I knew briefly, but who I knew, he was a pretty famous lawyer, too. Who was he?
My dad was named Rex Lee. He was the Solicitor General of the United States under President Reagan, so he was the federal government's chief advocate before the Supreme Court during the Reagan administration. He later served as president of Brigham Young University.
So your dad, you, your family, but you've studied, you kind of know what the Constitution's about, separation of powers and so forth and so on. What is this idea that on the floor of the United States Senate, you can't introduce amendments, you can't question these massive spending bills? I could have sworn this was supposed to be the greatest deliberative body on the face of the earth, wasn't it?
Well, it is supposed to be, and for at least the last 4 years, it hasn't been operating that way. We've had a new kind of gridlock in Washington. It's not your standard garden variety Republican versus Democratic gridlock or disagreement. This is a situation in which we're not allowed to offer amendments. We're not allowed to offer to improve bills as they come up for consideration on the Senate floor. And we have to fight tooth and nail to get votes on anything. And that's really what you saw unfolding the other day, was a whole lot of pent-up energy that relates to the fact that we're not really allowed to be senators right now. We're there basically as votes or as props standing in for votes at the end of a long process that takes place largely behind closed doors. Large 1,700 page bills are negotiated in secret and then rolled out at the final hour, and we're asked to give them a simple up or down vote without any opportunity to make them better. And that's bad. That's wrong. That's not how our system is supposed to work.
And tell me, how many subcommittees and committees reviewed this massive spending bill?
Not one.
Tell me, Senator, how many public hearings were there so the public could participate and sit in the room and listen?
Exactly 0.
0. So this is the way business is done. This is one of the reasons why you are now being targeted by many people and attacked. Let me ask you this, Senator. You and Ted Cruz, did you have anything to do with the timing of this omnibus bill coming to the floor?
No, none whatsoever. And in fact, it's one of my great frustrations at the Senate. One of the things that I've been encouraging my colleagues in the Senate to do, one of the things that I wish Harry Reid would do, is bring these things to the Senate floor in regular order so that we don't have to wait until people are all upset that they've got, plans to go home for Christmas, so that we don't have to wait until the final hour so that things can't get reviewed the way they're supposed to. This could have been and should have been brought up months ago, and it wasn't. It was instead dropped into the Congress just days before it needed to be passed, and it's not a good way to run anything. especially the world's largest, most expensive operation being the U.S. government.
Now, Harry Reid also blew up the filibuster process relating to judicial nominations below the Supreme Court and executive branch nominations. And after the landslide the Republicans had in November, I'm reading here he was already plotting, figuring out when and how to get certain of the priority judicial and other candidates passed. Now I see your detractors within the Republican Party are attacking you and Cruz for making it possible. So let me get this straight. Only on Saturday, this Saturday, would Harry Reid have done this and no other time. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's what some would have you believe, and they are mistaken. They are badly mistaken. Look, it would have been political malpractice for Harry Reid to just go home and not try to do this. Of course he's doing this. Of course he's making every attempt that he possibly can to get these people passed. There's nothing that we did the other day that could have made it more likely that he's going to push for those people to get confirmed. And those who are suggesting otherwise, I think, are just badly mistaken.
Let me ask you this. Jonathan Turley, Professor Turley, is representing Boehner and others in a lawsuit challenging Obama's actions with respect to certain imperial actions, I think particularly related to Obamacare. Now, as your fellow senators and House members continue to vote to fund Obamacare, continue, actually Saturday, rubber stamping his unconstitutional action when it came to amnesty, this is creating quite a troubling record for Professor Turley when he takes it into federal court, don't you think?
It certainly doesn't help. But, you know, I can't be certain that that's going to be the issue on which that case turns. But I see what you're getting at, and it certainly doesn't help anything. Mm-hmm. But to me, Mark, the most important thing here to remember is that we are a coordinate branch of government. We're one of the three branches of government. We've got to be doing more than simply punting this to the federal courts. We've got to put our big boy pants and we've got to act like a coordinate branch of government. We've got to use the tools at our disposal rather than just raising our hands and saying, please, courts, will you help us? And I don't think that the lawsuit is where we ought to put all of our hopes. Now, my hope is that litigation might be successful, but we can't hang our hat on that. And doing things like this certainly aren't going to help.
And why now on this omnibus bill? We just won a landslide victory. You're going to take the Senate. Why not just a short-term continuing resolution for the entire budget until the Republicans control the Senate in January when your new colleagues are sworn in? What was that all about?
I'm not sure. I'm probably not the best spokesman for that because that is not the option that I would have chosen. Had I had a say in it, which I did not. I would have preferred to see something done on a much more short-term basis. I know there were some in the House that argued that they had put together a number of appropriations bills that they really wanted passed into the Senate. That's why they decided to go with a quasi-omnibus, quasi-continuing resolution. But still, I don't entirely understand why it is that they decided to take this route rather than just go with something very short-term, allowing the new Republican Congress to take care of the whole thing.
Generally speaking, what's the atmosphere like up in the Senate? If I may ask, if you want to answer, you don't have to.
Well, people are cranky. They're cranky. They didn't want to be in there voting on Saturday, and some of them are not real pleased with the fact that I objected to Harry Reid's unanimous consent requests late Friday night that would have allowed us to adjourn for 72 hours and not reconvene until tonight. That is their right to disagree with me on that, just as it is my right to say, no, we should stay in session when we have a $1 trillion spending bill on the floor, just as it was my right to say, I'm not agreeing to that unanimous consent unless I get my amendment. Being a senator comes with certain prerogatives, and one of those prerogatives is deciding when you will and when you won't give unanimous consent to a time agreement like that, and I wasn't willing to. There was too much on the line, and people are free to disagree with me if they want, but they're wrong to suggest that by doing that I somehow changed the landscape when it comes to those executive nominations that Harry Reid's going to try to push through.
You're certainly not the first senator to stand up on the Senate floor and fight for something. I mean, it's so preposterous. And you're certainly not the first senator to stand up and fight for something relating to a budget, relating to the Constitution. This wasn't your timing. This timing was set up by others. And what are you supposed to do? Just rubber stamp something you disagree with and go home and celebrate Christmas?
Yes. Yes.
Apparently so.
Yeah. In the eyes of many, that's what I'm supposed to do. As to be a good little senator, especially being a relatively junior senator, which I am. Some would suggest that's what I'm supposed to do. With due respect to those who feel that way, I view my role differently. I have my own election certificate. I work for the 3 million people in Utah who elected me, and I'm supposed to utilize my discretion to decide how best to stand up for the rights and the interests of the American people, rather than just proceed in blind deference to others who purport to know what we should do.
What do you make of, my last question, Senator, and I appreciate your time, what do you make of the budget itself? I mean, as people are studying this, there are tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in pork in here. There are policy things that are in here. As a matter of fact, there's a piece in the Washington Examiner today by Byron York where this spells all kinds of controls placed on spending, all kinds of directives and prohibitions to the most minute point. When you all were told, and we all were told, you can't do that when it comes to immigration because, that's funded differently, and clearly you can. I mean, this whole bill is a monstrosity. You voted against it. What do you make of the fact that only 18 Republicans voted against it in the Senate?
Well, each senator will have to explain his or her vote. Let me tell you why I voted against it. I voted against it because this was the worst process you can possibly imagine for a bill. It was not even released to the public until days before it was voted upon. And then even after that happened, they added another 150 pages to it, so that it's well over 1,700 pages long now. It contains all kinds of things. I mean, there are some good things in there that you can find, but there are a lot of bad things too. And the problem is we had no opportunity to change it. I mean, all legislation involves some degree of compromise, but it's not enough to just say this bill is okay and you can overlook its flaws because it's about compromise. That's not good enough. You have to be able to look at it and say, this is worth it. We can't say that here because this was never subjected to any kind of open process.
That's the point. There is no compromise. It's up or down on the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So those who are suggesting that this is the result of compromise are not really talking about compromise. They're talking about collusion, which is a very different thing. Compromise involves legislatively a very open process in which you come to an agreement about competing interests and everyone benefits. Collusion is what happens when a few people get together behind closed doors, come to an agreement that is beneficial to them, notwithstanding the fact that it hurts a lot of other people. That's what we had here. That's why I voted against it.
One last thing, I lied. My last question.
No problem.
When you ran for office, did you run on I will do what the Republicans tell me to do in Washington, or did you run on I will represent you based on my principles as presented to you?
I chose the latter option, and I told the people of Utah, look, I'm not going to go back there and just do what the media tells me to do. I'm not going to go back there and do what certain officials within the Republican Party tell me to do.
Back there being Washington, you're in Utah.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Washington, and I'm going to represent you based on my commitment to defend, uphold, and protect the Constitution of the United States as I interpret it. And I will read the Constitution based on what it says rather than what I wish it said. I will do that based on what the Constitution says and how it was understood by the founding generation. And I will see it as more than just a conglomeration of whatever the courts have said they will allow Congress to get away with. I also told them that for whatever it's worth, when I'm not given an opportunity to read a particular bill, if they drop a 1,700-page bill and don't give me adequate time to review it, I will vote no every single time on a bill like that because you can't vote yes on something that you haven't read.
Well, I'm proud of you. I endorsed you early on in your convention fight. I knew you were the real deal. I know it's extremely difficult in Washington not to go along with the crowd. This is the problem we face in the country. It's the problem we face in Washington. It's the problem we face now in the Republican Party. So your voice is being heard. You have enormous integrity and courage, And, Senator, I want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's good to be with you as always. And thank you for your kind words.
God bless and take care of yourself. And Merry Christmas.